We need a court reporter. All right, Madam Reporter, you ready? All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey, people represented by Ms. Clark, and Mr. Kelberg and Ms. Lewis. Good morning, counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'm here to simply schedule a hearing or two hearings on motions that were filed last week. One of those was filed by Hank Goldberg last Thursday to preclude the testimony of the defense expert Herbert McDonald for discovery violations, and as an additional ground, though it may not be addressed in the motion, lack of foundation for his testimony. That was served on counsel last Thursday, and I'm wondering what...
Excuse me, counsel, can we have a quiet, please?
I'm wondering what the court's convenience is on the scheduling. Now, I should mention that they've listed him as potentially coming up as early as Wednesday, and since we feel that he should not be allowed to testify at all on a dual basis of inadequate foundation and discovery violations, I think this would be useful to both sides to resolve as soon as possible.
Mr. Douglas, when do you anticipate this witness testifying?
Your Honor, I haven't seen that motion. I was asking Mr. Cochran if he'd seen it. I haven't.
It was served upon Mr. Shapiro, I'm told, by Diana Martinez.
When, counsel?
When it was served Thursday.
All right, Mr. Douglas, do you know when you anticipate this witness being called?
Your Honor, I anticipate it being called sometime on Wednesday. Can we have a hearing perhaps tomorrow afternoon?
All right,
What time, Your Honor?
1:30. 1:30.
Thank you. The other...
Excuse me, 1 o'clock.
The other motion has to do with collateral impeachment witnesses regarding Detective Fuhrman. That was filed and served last Friday. The defense initially had some such witnesses on a short list, then removed them. So I'm not sure what their timing is, or their expectation with regard to those witnesses, but we do need to have that resolved, of course.
I think Friday, Your Honor, would be an appropriate day for that motion. Those witnesses will likely not be called until next week.
All right. Let's see, that is the 21st. I seem to recollect we have another matter set the 21st in the afternoon. All right, we'll make it the 21st then at 1:30. All right.
All right, I think that does it. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Douglas, you have a matter?
Your Honor, yes, and we can deal with it now or perhaps this afternoon. It concerns the testimony of the nurse Thano Paradas. I submitted this morning to the court an affidavit from Mr. Paradas' doctor.
Right, I received it. I have not. I've been in chambers with counsel on other matters. I have not had the opportunity to read it.
Yes, Your Honor. In a nutshell, the motion seeks to declare Mr. Paradas unavailable and seeks to allow the introduction of his preliminary hearing testimony by video and portions of his grand jury testimony to be read. We would like that could be resolved today so that we can edit the tape and have that for presentation to the jury tomorrow afternoon.
Out of curiosity, what's your theory of admissibility of grand jury testimony?
That it's being offered against the party who introduced the testimony at the actual proceeding, the earlier proceeding, that it is sworn testimony. We are simply seeking the grand jury portion to reinforce the preliminary hearing testimony concerning the amount of blood that was withdrawn, the approximately 8 cc's. 1291A2, I believe it is.
All right. Ms. Clark?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe that Mr. Goldberg will be best able to address this. I think that we can take live testimony from Mr. Paradas. Yes, I do. We've had contact with him in the past couple of days, and it's not clear at all that this declaration by the physician is dispositive. I understand that the defense does not want to allow Mr. Paradas to testify live to modify his testimony or explain what actually occurred when he drew Mr. Simpson's blood, but the people think it's very important that the jury get the truth of this matter and that the jury be informed of what actually transpired.
We're talking about holding a 240 availability
Yes.
hearing here. All right. When do you anticipate being able to do that, since this was just filed today?
if I may make a phone call, I was just handed this morning as well. If I may call Mr. Goldberg, we have been working on this issue, as a matter of fact, to see when Mr. Paradas would be available and able to testify and in what manner. I can call Mr. Goldberg now. I can find out for the court immediately.
No, I would suggest, why don't you just advise the court at the, after the lunch hour?
Okay, sure.
And counsel today, the lunch hour will go until 1:30.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
For the record, Your Honor, Mr. Pradas had a triple bypass surgery.
Well, counsel, I understand that he's had some medical problems, but we'll take it up when we have the hearing.
Very well.
All right.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot. In a footnote in my brief with regard to the collateral impeachment witnesses, I asked to see the court in camera ex parte, and what I'm going to do is submit that under seal.
All right. Fine. Thank you. Give it to Mrs. Robertson. All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please. Let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody looks fit and rested after a weekend. All right, Dr. Heisinger, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, good morning again, Doctor.
Morning.
Doctor, you're reminded, sir, you are still under oath, and Mr. Kelberg, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Doctor, I want to ask you if you would look at your original report of June 15th, which is marked as Exhibit 507, and page 2, acute problem number 2. I'm going to ask Mr. Fairlow to put this back up, and he's got it right where I'd like it. There's a topic heading of night sweats. Do you recall testifying about that, I think in response to Mr. Shapiro's direct examination?
Yes, I do.
And Doctor, this description was provided to you by Mr. Simpson on June 15th, 1994. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Now, Doctor, night sweats by definition are circumstances in which a person awakens, usually in the middle of the night, dripping wet, correct?
That is correct.
It is not a situation of a person who is in an awakened state perspiring.
Typically not.
So, and Mr. Farrell, I think we're done with that. So, for example, Doctor, I want you to assume there's been testimony in this court from a limousine driver, Mr. Park, that he picked up Mr. Simpson on June 12, 1994 at Mr. Simpson's Rockingham estate, roughly around 11 o'clock at night. And that as Mr. Simpson is getting into the car and through the course of the drive to Los Angeles International Airport and as to getting out of the car, Mr. Simpson appeared to be sweating, complained of being hot, asked that the air conditioning be turned on, had the windows rolled down. Assuming that testimony has been given here, Doctor, that would not be the product of the night sweats Mr. Simpson was complaining of to you on June 15th, correct? You may answer the question, Doctor.
No, I would have to disagree with that because he complained of night sweats, but when you sweat at night, that may also indicate episodes of sweating during the day. And there are many other reasons, including lymphoma and various infectious disease, and rheumatologic diseases that can cause sweats, possibly predominantly at night, where a doctor may mistakenly call them night sweats, but that in fact there may be thermal regulation problems and temperature variations at other times in the day.
Well, doctor, though, you understood the night sweats to be based on the complaints that he was waking up in the middle of the night dripping wet with sweat over the last 30-day period, right?
That's exactly correct.
He was not complaining that during the day when he was up and about, he was sweating unnaturally, correct?
He did not complain of flushing or things that I would consider endocrine pheochromosoma type symptoms. However, his history under the circumstances was rather trying.
Well, trying, doctor, what do you mean his history under the circumstance was trying? You were trying to get from him a detailed history, is that correct?
That is correct.
And in what fashion would you describe it as trying on Mr. Simpson to ask about his medical history?
He was obviously in a 2-hour period, and then in the next encounter on the 17th, another hour or so. The vast majority of that time was talking about, obviously, his acute stress and problems of that nature, in addition to obviously going over every possible cause of the sweats, which I viewed as one of his 2 top problems, so that obviously to go back and to try to differentiate between night sweats and any of the other causes that can cause sweats at night and sweats during the day is probably not all that important. And very frankly, Mr. Simpson, given the fact that he was sleep deprived, was not being as sharp as he might otherwise have been in giving a very clear and lucid history.
When you say not as sharp as he might have been, you had never seen Mr. Simpson before June 15, 1994 as a physician, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
You have no basis, no baseline basis as of June 15, 1994 to assess the sharpness of Mr. Simpson's ability to recall his medical history, correct?
No, that's absolutely incorrect. There were parts during my physical, I mean, obviously when somebody comes in with a complaint, a severe complaint, they're going to be very attentive, and there were periods that he was so sleep deprived that he almost fell asleep right in my office. We essentially had to give him coffee and get him up and moving because he was just really so sleep deprived and so distraught at that point in time. So it was not an optimal time to elicit very detailed medical details.
Doctor, are you familiar with a drug called Xanax?
Yes, I am.
What is that drug, doctor?
Xanax is a medication that affects the secretion of acid in the stomach.
And what is the general purpose of taking
Xanax or Zantac, excuse me?
Xanax.
Oh, Xanax.
X-A-N-A-X.
Okay. Xanax is a anti-anxiety medication.
And to your knowledge, was Mr. Simpson taking Xanax as of June 15, 1994?
To my knowledge, based on what he told me, he was not taking Xanax. I didn't get that history, no.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Doctor, were you ever apprised that in a duffel bag searched on June 17, 1994, a full bottle of Xanax was found?
No one has ever told me that. I've never been apprised of that in any way.
Now, doctor, in your page 2 of your report, you say on this night sweats issue, the patient admits to a month-long history of nocturnal sweats severe enough to awaken him and require him to towel off his entire body, then go to sleep or other non-soaked side of the bed without associated flushing or known fever, right?
That's correct.
Now, if a person had an influenza and develops a fever, you would expect to see chills initially as the fever escalates, right?
During the evolving phase of the fever as it's going up, you're right, you would typically see chills.
And then as the fever breaks, and the reason you have the chill sensation is because your body, being warmer than its normal temperature, is sensing a chilliness to the environment around it.
No, that's absolutely incorrect. What happens when you get a chill is as the temperature goes up, your brain, for a variety of reasons, maybe it's saying, hey, there's an infection, and the infection can't live at 104 degrees, but my body can. So what the body does is it makes you chill, it makes you shake, and that generates heat, and that's the body's mechanism to raise your temperature. So no, that's an incorrect explanation of that phenomenon, I believe.
All right, doctor, would you agree that as the fever breaks, that one then experiences sweats as the temperature of the body starts coming down to the normal temperature.
Typically, you will sweat as the temperature comes down as a means of evaporating so that you can lose that heat.
Did you ever, prior to June 15, 1994, receive any information as to what temperatures Mr. Simpson had over the period of, let's say, June 10th through June 15th?
No, he did not take his temperature, to my knowledge, any of these times, so we had no information there.
And he denied having a fever, correct?
He did not feel that he had a fever. On the other hand, people can have temperatures that are quite high and not know them, and then you go, gee, your temperature is 102, and they go, oh, really?
But the temperature you took was 98.9, right?
That is correct.
And that's within the normal range of
I
temperature.
think that's a couple of ticks higher, but I'd have to call that a normal temperature.
Well, if there's been testimony received in this trial that people who have evaluated temperatures in bodies for the purposes of estimating time of death have given as a normal range of temperatures that rise even a degree above 98.6, would you have any reason to disagree with that assessment?
No, I wouldn't. Actually, there's a circadian pattern of temperature, and your body temperature hits a nadir or low point usually at night, and it may be a little bit warmer in the afternoon. So absolutely, it can vary quite a bit.
Now, doctor, I want you to assume hypothetically that on June 12, 1994, at between 10:15 and 10:30, Mr. Simpson murdered Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman in a very brief and violent assault. He then hurried back to his house and arrived sometime about 10 to 11 to 11 o'clock at night. He then rushed around to get his materials together, to get into the limousine, to rush to Los Angeles Airport, to catch an airplane to go to Chicago. Assuming such hypothetical circumstances, doctor, would that be a basis to cause sweating in a human being who is feeling perfectly healthy otherwise?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Doctor, assuming that Mr. Simpson had engaged in vigorous physical activity within an hour of being observed by the limousine driver to be sweating, to complain of being hot, would that be a basis for someone to be sweating?
There are many causes of sweating, one of which is athletic endeavors or the use of your muscles over a certain threshold.
And would it be correct, doctor, that the more vigorous the physical activity, the more sweating one might expect?
Given the humidity, given the patient's level of hydration, I think that that's generally a pretty reasonable assumption.
And is it also correct, doctor, that when people are rushing around trying to meet a deadline, that they tend to perspire?
They may. On the other hand, some people that rush around that are extremely nervous or apprehensive may get cold hands and may have kind of an opposite effect. But I think in generalities, I can't quibble with that.
And so, doctor, if one were to evaluate Mr. Park's testimony that Mr. Simpson was sweating and complained of being hot, asked for the air conditioning to be turned on and so forth, that would not be consistent with your alternative definition of night sweats as being a circumstance other than the usual case of awakening in the middle of the night, right?
I'm going to ask you to rephrase the question,
All right.
counsel.
Doctor,
especially-
you said initially that night sweats are typically associated with people waking up sweating profusely, right?
Night sweats are. I wasn't sure what the heck he had. I was still searching for why he was sweating. I put down night sweats because that's what I got out of him under those trying situations. I had no idea what the cause was, and eventually, when I came to my best guess as to the cause, that sort of sweating may occur during the day.
Well, doctor, what literature are you relying upon to support your conclusion that night sweats, which might be related to an infection which may be the cause for the enlarged lymph nodes, would lead to daytime night sweats, if using the term loosely, rather than the traditionally understood definition of night sweats as awakening in the middle of the night, dripping wet?
Overruled.
You may answer the question, doctor.
My in arrears impression
And
of
I hate
his...
to move to strike, but the question was, what literature was he relying upon?
Doctor, would you answer? That is true.
What, if any, literature?
Standard textbooks,
Which one?
the current standard library book on rheumatoid arthritis and rheumatic disease lists that during episodes where rheumatic disease, specifically rheumatoid arthritis, is beginning to kick up again, some of the signs may include low-grade temperature elevation, sweating, and adenopathy lymph nodes. That's my best guess as to what was going on with him, but there are other explanations, and very frankly, you know, unlike what some people would try to insinuate, there aren't simple blood tests that can diagnose rheumatoid arthritis or other diseases. So that's my best guess, but I don't have absolute concrete evidence of what the cause was.
Doctor, at a recess, would you please advise defense counsel of what book it is and see if somebody can perhaps have it faxed over if you have it in your library
Sure.
or something, so that we can have the page or pages you're referring to. But in the meantime, you told us on Friday that in your opinion, Mr. Simpson was not in fact suffering from an acute onset of rheumatoid arthritis on June 15th, correct?
That's absolutely incorrect, because what I believe I said, and I may have been in some kind of a zone, was that he had some atypical features. His C-reactive protein was negative, his RA quant was negative, and his sedimentation rate at 24 was lower than I certainly would expect for an acute flare. However, were that it was so easy, these are tools that help you diagnose rheumatoid arthritis, and you have to kind of evaluate the entire patient. And I think it's still a very difficult, tough call, but given, you know, the entire, you know, American Rheumatiz, Association's criteria, there's 7 different criteria. C-reactive protein's not on there, sedimentation's not on there. They're just too insensitive and nonspecific to qualify for diagnosing rheumatoid arthritis. So you have to rely on clinical symptoms, of which he had some very striking, X-ray evidence, and the fact that he's had 2 biopsies, one of his left knee and one of his right axilla, that are consistent with rheumatoid arthritis. I'm not a rheumatologist. I've never pretended to be. I'm his doctor. I try to be the general that coordinates, but that's my best assumption based on what I've heard.
You were his doctor for the first time on June 15th, 1994, isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And in fact, doctor, from all the records you've obtained, when was the last time Mr. Simpson saw any other doctor?
He last saw, he never had a quote-unquote doctor. He had an orthopedic specialist, Dr. Frank Jobe, who he saw July, I believe it's 13, 1993. And at that time, Dr. Jobe, an orthopedic specialist, felt that OJ was in an acute rheumatoid arthritis flare, and then immediately sent him to Dr. Maltz.
Strike, that was not the question.
Stricken. Jury's to disregard.
Doctor, would you please listen to my question?
Okay.
My question was, when, prior to June 15th, 1994, did Mr. Simpson last see a physician?
He saw a physician, he saw 2 different physicians, Frank Jobe, an orthopedist, and Dr. Maltz, a rheumatologist, on July 13, 1993.
And so your examination is taking place 11 months since his last examination by any physician, at least to your knowledge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, you said you had these blood tests ordered on June 15th, 1994, which included the RA quant and the CRP, C-reactive protein, right?
Yes.
And they came back negative in both cases, right?
Correct.
You also said that you did not detect bilateral swelling, which would be the traditional thing to see an acute episode of rheumatoid arthritis, right?
That would be one of the traditional signs, exactly.
So, doctor, is it your statement that on June 15th, 1990...
Let me correct that. He did have bilateral elbow problems, and he did have problems on both hands that were difficult to differentiate. Osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis can sometimes merge. It can be a very difficult call. What's a hard joint? What's a boggy joint? And to the best of my knowledge, when I saw him, I did not believe he was having a flare. It was only in arrears that I came to that assumption. I did not feel, I thought it was mostly or all osteoarthritis when I saw him. Number one, he wasn't complaining of joint pain. He wasn't sent to me for joint pain. He didn't get sent to me. He didn't say he had a problem with his joints. I just detected it watching him limp and just saying, what's going on in this regard? He never complained of weak grip, of bad knees, of bad wrists. I picked that up. He kind of just shrugged everything off. That wasn't why I was examining him. That was just a total aside.
Now, you said weak grip. Is that what you said, doctor?
I said he was not complaining of weak grip. He
Well,
was not.
You found it was a normal grip.
That's exactly right. I'm explaining that he wasn't complaining of joint problems.
And-
I found joint problems. He didn't come in saying, gee, I'm limping, I can't walk, make the pain go away. He basically shrugged those problems off.
Let me invite your attention and counsel's attention. This is from the real-time transcript, so I'm not sure how one finds it. It's from the disc printed out on page 397. And the question asked was, again, this would suggest that Mr. Simpson did not have an acute episode of rheumatoid arthritis, correct? And your answer was it would be on that side.
Okay.
Recall that?
I do,
Were
but
you
this
asked
is
that
why
question?
this yes-no stuff doesn't get information across. This is what I said. I said,
Excuse me, doctor. The question was, do you recollect that, giving that answer to that question?
yes, I do.
Next question.
Doctor, do you consider yourself an advocate for Mr. Simpson?
I consider myself Mr. Simpson's doctor. When someone comes into my office, I'm their doctor.
Do you? I'm sorry.
I would not in any way lie, but my job is to be his doctor and take care of his health. That's my duty.
Would you agree that your examination on the 15th was an unusual circumstance of seeing a patient for the first time?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Shapiro, who was, I think you said, your partner's patient,
Correct.
brought Mr. Simpson to see you. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's a yes?
Yes.
And would it be accurate to say, doctor, that you had socialized with Mr. Shapiro from what you said last Friday?
I think that would be a stretch. He was at the Lyle Alzado benefit, and I've seen him at probably 2 charity functions, so I've seen him very cursorily on 3 social occasions, basically the same number of times I've been at a social occasion with Gil Garcetti. So, I mean, I don't.
That's 3 more than I've been with Mr. Garcetti, I can assure you.
I don't consider myself a social acquaintance of his.
Well, you used the term socializing in your direct examination, didn't you, doctor?
He asked, had we socialized? And I believe my answer was, no, not really. I've seen you at a couple of quote-unquote events. He's the auctioneer for a charity both of our wives belong to. And that's essentially the other 2 times I've seen him at functions. Have not sat with him, have not talked with him. We're acquaintances.
Let me see if I can find the examination. On page 317 of the printout. Would you describe us as social friends? Question, answer. We have seen each other at several outings, but I would say it is more professional than social.
I agree with that statement.
All right. Now, doctor, had you ever seen Mr. Shapiro in the absence of your partner as a patient?
Yes, I have.
Now, doctor, would you agree that a lot of what you're trying to do on the 15th, besides taking a history, is to interpret these findings that you're observing?
Sure, I observe things and I try to interpret them. That's a fair statement.
And much of medical interpretation is subjective in nature, is it not, doctor?
I think that there is a degree of subjectiveness, and blood tests don't tell all that much in many instances.
Well, for example, the grip test, for example, you said you didn't use any kind of objective measuring device, you didn't have one, so you had the test as you demonstrated with me, and you felt that he had normal grip strength. That's a subjective evaluation, is it not, doctor?
Yes, it is.
Now, doctor, would it be accurate to say that even if one consciously did not want to be influenced in how they evaluate a patient, there can be subconscious influences that cause a person to be biased?
If it's subconscious, I wouldn't be aware of it, so it's difficult for me to comment on that.
Well, doctor, would you agree that your relationship with Mr. Shapiro, at least on the surface, carries the possibility that in your subjective evaluations of the patient, you may be subconsciously biased to make findings that will please Mr. Shapiro or help Mr. Shapiro's client?
All medical patients are referred by other people, typically in your
John,
practice.
I
and
have to move to strike. It's non-responsive to the question.
Oh, he can answer the way he wants. That goes to bias.
All right.
Counsel. Doctor, continue your answer.
When you see a patient, either you've got it or you don't. Either you're going to be an honest evaluator and try to use the experience you've had and try to use the proficiency you've demonstrated in your training, and hopefully you care about people and you're going to do the best job you can. And that's really all that I tried to do.
Well, doctor, did you consider the possibility that you should tell Mr. Shapiro, look it, you should get a doctor who does not know you as a patient, who has no relationship whatsoever with you as a patient, who has no relationship with Mr. Simpson, so that that doctor would be in the best position to be fair and objective in evaluating Mr. Simpson? Did you ever say that to Mr. Shapiro?
No, I never said that to him.
Did you ever consider that possibility?
No, I never considered that possibility.
And doctor, did you ever feel that it was part of your responsibility to try and prepare a defense for Mr. Simpson to the charges?
No, absolutely not.
Would it be accurate to say that the exam on the 15th was in fact an effort to start preparing a defense to anticipated charges?
Sustained.
Doctor, did you believe, you said it was a somewhat unusual circumstance, did you believe that the focus of that examination on the 15th was in part to start preparing a possible defense in the event Mr. Simpson was charged?
Two sub-answers to that. Number one, if I would have thought that, obviously the first thing I should have done is documented any infirmity in terms of these orthopedic problems to the nth degree. That's really not the tact I took. I took the tact to address his mental status problems and his insomnia and his difficulty handling this incredible stress that maybe no other human being short of Job has endured. And number two, to address a problem that I felt was potentially life-threatening, and that was an acute lymph node under his arm associated with night sweats and clubbing, and I went after that. That had nothing to do with this incident, and that's where all my attention and energy was focused during this initial several weeks. And when he even went into the jailhouse and the physician there initially said he didn't have a lymph node, all my efforts were aimed in that direction, which I think had nothing to do with the defense. I think they probably wished I would go away. I just, took pictures of the cuts, and, obviously I just wanted everything documented in that regard. But I did really, I followed the advice of somebody that gave me a long time ago, and that's that you treat all patients the same. The minute you start doing special stuff for special patients, you get yourself into a heap of trouble as a doctor.
I just want to be clear in your answer. Is it your characterization that Mr. Simpson is in a situation which, to your knowledge, only Job has suffered more?
I think the pressure that was on him, for whatever reason, was a tremendous weight, the change in his life status that very few, if any, people have experienced, in my opinion.
And if he had murdered two human beings, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman, would that be the kind of thing that would cause a great weight to be on a man's shoulders?
Overruled.
You may answer the question, doctor.
If someone hypothetically killed someone, they certainly would have a great weight on their shoulders.
I'm asking, you've described Mr. Simpson, I'm asking you, assuming he had done that, would that be, in your opinion, a great weight on Mr. Simpson's shoulder to bear? Not a hypothetical anyone, but Mr. Simpson.
Sustained. Sustained.
Doctor, may I approach Your Honor? Do you have the note, for reference, is page 484 of the materials. Do you have this note in the original, doctor?
No, I don't.
Your Honor, I ask that this page 484 be marked as People's Exhibit, I think it's 511.
511. Sure that's Mr. Shapiro.
I mentioned the page from the discovery. And if we could lower it, Mr. No, I'm sorry. Doctor, can you see that? Do you have the copy of this letter?
I
material?
definitely wrote it. I
No,
don't know what
excuse me.
happened to it.
The question is, do you have a copy of the letter that we're seeing on the screen? Not the small, what appears maybe to be a Post-it sticker entry, but the actual letter.
I don't have a copy of that.
Isn't it normal practice for a physician to keep a copy of any letter that they sent to an attorney regarding a patient of the doctor's?
I don't have it.
No, my question, doctor, is, isn't it the usual practice to keep a copy of any such letter?
I don't deal with legal matters, so I think that we try to keep all of our letters.
Well, doctor, in your training as a physician, haven't you been trained that you save basically any correspondence regarding the patient?
Yes, I think that's a good habit.
And what, if any, explanation do you have for not having the February 5th, 1995 letter to Mr. Douglas?
This is my best remembrance of that. I was told right around January that there was some kind of flap about my records. So I was called by Carl Douglas, and he said, we're not going to release your medical records. We want a statement. We want a 1 or 2 or 3 page, we want a 1-page statement that summarizes your findings. So I typed up a 1-page statement summarizing my findings and then put a little sticker on the top and said, is this the kind of thing that you're looking for? Is this thorough enough? Obviously, you can't say much in 1 page. Do you want more detail? That's basically the gist of that. And that was something that was requested of me by Mr. Douglas on the phone.
So, doctor, in your opinion, this doesn't reflect that you were an advocate for Mr. Simpson in asking one of his lawyers whether this represented the kind of statement he sought?
No, absolutely not. Basically, in my mind, it was he wanted me to summarize my entire findings, and I didn't know if that was too much or too little detail. I knew that it was all truthful. I just didn't know if he wanted me to expand or contract, because he had some problems with some of my chart, apparently.
Mr. Shapiro, pages 465 and 466.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. May I approach again?
You may.
Doctor, showing you, first of all, what is marked as page 465. These are the materials that we received from the defense.
Uh-huh.
By the way, before I forget, you did write that note, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's on Exhibit 511.
Right. Referring to what appears to be a Post-it note.
Correct.
Now, this document, July 6, 1994, did you write this letter to Mr. Shapiro?
Yes, I did.
Do you have a copy of this letter in your file?
Yes, I do.
And let me show you what is, it's going to be marked in just a second. Show you page 466 of the material, July 28, 1994 letter. Did you send this letter to a colleague of Mr. Shapiro's, Ms. Kaplan?
It looks like I sent it to Robert Shapiro, right, and Sarah. Yes, I did.
Okay, and do you have a copy of this letter in
Yes,
your
I do.
file? Doctor, would you explain why you kept copies of these 2 letters and did not keep a copy of the later letter of February 5, 1995 that is up on the board as Exhibit 511?
I probably have it somewhere in my office if I dug. This chart, as you can see, is getting pretty unwieldy, so I bet if I really dug around and looked, I could find it. But I don't believe, I just went through it last Friday, and I don't believe I have it. I may. I would have no reason to dispose it, that's for sure.
All right, doctor's referring to what appears to be about a 4 to 5 inch stack of papers.
Doctor, when did you first get apprised you were going to testify?
I was first told, I don't know, I think beginning of June, something like that.
Of 1995.
1995, right.
And were you told that it would be important to have all your records together?
No, I was really never given any such instructions.
In your practice, is it your practice to keep a patient's file altogether so that you have access at any convenient time to review the entire
Absolutely,
file?
yes. Absolutely, yes.
So it wouldn't be your practice to have documents not in this patient's file, right?
Typically not, you know.
You have patients who have files that are much thicker than this one, right?
Not too much.
Not too much thicker or not too
No.
many patients.
Not too much thicker.
You could always divide it into a second file if you needed to.
Well, that may have happened. There actually may be, there may be other things that are in, you know, the medical papers that were Xeroxed off about his particular case, and there may be stuff floating there. I'd have to go back and check.
Most of these records that compile your file are not your own personal records, are they?
No, that's correct.
They are the records you've acquired from other physicians who have seen Mr. Simpson.
Correct.
And about how many pages would you estimate your own reports constitute of that file that is presently sitting in front of you, resting in front of you?
40, I don't know, 50?
And that's not a particularly thick patient file, is it?
No, it's not.
So if we set aside the other pages that are due to other doctors' records, Mr. Simpson's file in your possession of your materials is a relatively modest file, is it not?
There have been fatter ones.
Let me ask Mr. Fairlow, and Your Honor, I'd ask then that page 465 be marked as People's Exhibit 512.
512. This is a letter dated,
July 6, 1994, Your Honor.
thank you.
Now, Doctor, you said that you didn't consider yourself that you were an advocate for Mr. Simpson. Is that correct?
I considered that as his doctor, that I certainly would be an advocate to get his health situation in as best a shape as I could.
Did you consider that as part of that responsibility, it was to try and get him acquitted of these charges?
No, I really didn't, as a matter of fact.
Would you look, if you would, please, to the last paragraph of that letter directed to Dear Bob, Mr. Shapiro? And for the record, the night sweats Mr. Simpson complained of may be pertinent to the court testimony of the chauffeur, who implied O.J. was quite warm when he got in the limo. We need to follow up on this from a medical standpoint. You wrote that, didn't you, Doctor?
Yes, I did.
The first sentence of that paragraph is not pertinent to your role as a physician trying to identify a medical condition, is it, Doctor?
The first sentence of
That last paragraph that I just read.
the night sweats. Was- I think that the answer is yes and no. The problem was he was in jail. I couldn't get to him. They would not let me in because I didn't have clearance. He had these night sweats. The jail people were saying he didn't have a lymph node, and I felt that his medical condition needed evaluation.
Doctor, my question was, and maybe you can explain how that answer indicates that your first sentence of that last paragraph, the night sweats Mr. Simpson complained of, may be pertinent to the court testimony of the chauffeur who implied O.J. was quite warm when he got in the limo.
He may be having fevers during the day that even he wasn't aware of.
That Mr. Simpson wasn't aware of.
It may be a sign of something. He really wasn't complaining of a whole lot, as I said. He wasn't complaining of the joint problems. And all of that added to my worry that he had some sort of infection, cancer, or some other etiology of not only night sweats, but possibly fevers during the day.
Doctor, were you aware of the preliminary hearing that involved Mr. Simpson initially in a court like this, but without a jury, where testimony was presented? Were you aware of it as it was ongoing?
I was aware of some of it. I would periodically read the newspapers, absolutely.
In fact, this letter is written in the course of that preliminary hearing, isn't it?
I would assume so, right, if it mentioned that episode where he testified that someone testified he was sweating during the day, because I obviously picked up on that.
And that's why you wanted to make sure Mr. Shapiro was aware of it, so that he may be able to use your medical finding for his legal purposes in defending Mr. Simpson. Isn't that why you included it, sir?
I don't believe that I did, but that's my opinion.
Let me ask, if I could, Your Honor, for page 466, which is dated July 28th of 94, we marked as exhibit, I think we're 513.
People's 513.
And this time, if we could, again, just so we could see the heading. Mr. Fairlow, could we? Thanks. This is a letter you sent on July 28th, 1994 to Mr. Shapiro to the attention of his colleague, Ms. Kaplan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it's addressed Dear Sarah. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, if I could ask Mr. Fairlow, let's drop down to the end of that, if we could, please. Item number 5 under the summary. As I previously discussed with Dr. M. Bodden, that's Dr. Michael Bodden, correct?
Correct.
And you understand that he's a forensic pathologist, correct? Correct, doctor?
That's correct.
OJ's severe left wrist arthritis and resultant marked decreased mobility of that joint may have implications for the forensic pathologist. You sent that in the letter, doctor?
Yes, I did.
Now, that has nothing to do with your role as a physician taking care of Mr. Simpson's medical problems, does it, sir?
No, it doesn't.
That's an advocate trying to suggest a possible avenue of defense to be used by another physician, Dr. Bodden, the forensic pathologist, correct?
Dr. Bodden and I, can you restate your question?
Your Honor, if possible, I know I speak quickly and I don't want to ask the reporter if it's too difficult. I'll re-ask it if it is, but if possible, I'd ask that it be reread.
You have it there before you.
The question is, doctor, again referring to that item 5, that is an advocate trying to suggest a possible avenue of defense to be used by another physician, Dr. Bodden, the forensic pathologist, correct?
Dr. Bodden and I were discussing various things when we were at Robert Kardashian's house on the 17th. In those discussions, those issues were asked of me, and those are the way that I replied.
Doctor, my question, though, is that has nothing to do with treating his medical condition as a physician, does it?
That has nothing to do with that, correct?
It has to do with trying to help him defend against the charges he faced, right?
It was in response to my conversation with Dr. Bodden.
Well, doctor,
Questions that he had asked me.
excuse me, doctor, you said you were with Dr. Bodden on June 17th, 1994, correct?
Correct.
The date of this letter is July 28th, 1994.
Right.
Dr. Bodden hadn't suddenly called you up before you sent this letter and said, I need some more information on this, right? He hadn't done that.
Dr. Bodden had called me on several occasions asking me questions.
Do you have any record of those conversations in your file, doctor?
No, I don't have any records.
Is there any note-taking that you made even if you didn't keep it?
No, there wasn't. They were basically questions about could I draw blood tests from various people in our office.
That was the substance of the calls from Dr.
Of those
Bodden?
calls, in addition to my discussing his arthritis problems, which they saw since we were all at the house together on the 17th, and we took photos together, retook photos of his cuts, and those questions were asked of me. I was there. They asked me these various questions, and I responded and followed through on some of the questions they asked me in these letters.
But you hadn't been specifically requested, had you, doctor, before sending the July 28th letter, to put it in writing to remind Dr. Bodden that there may be significance to this? You did this on your own accord, isn't that correct?
This is basically the note-taking that I did, right, to commiserate what had happened on that earlier conversation, absolutely.
Commiserate?
To put down on paper what we had discussed at that earlier date.
And you may have misspoken unintentionally, but your definition of commiserate, doctor.
Yeah, that was a misspeak.
Your understanding, though, of the definition of commiserate is?
That's not what I meant.
Well, my question to you is, sir, what is your definition of the word commiserate?
Commiserate is when you kind of tell sad tales together and hold hands.
Trying to buck everybody up in tough times?
Yeah, that is not, basically, he was asking me questions. He was working on the case, and obviously, they were calling me and asking me various medical questions about their particular areas of expertise, and I tried to respond as honestly as I could, and I certainly wasn't withholding or not mentioning them in letters or any other, typewritten records that I kept.
I think we're done with this document for right now. Mr. Farrell, we'll move back. This one.
That is 5:13.
13, I thought it was.
5:13. Mr. Kelberg, 10:45.
10:45?
10:45.
Doctor, briefly again on the grip test, did you do any test to see the maximum grip strength of Mr. Simpson?
No, I did not.
Thought we've been through this already.
We asked if it was normal, but I didn't ask whether he did something to assess the maximum grip strength.
Stand correct.
Now, doctor, you told Mr. Shapiro on direct that in your opinion, Mr. Simpson could hold a knife, right?
Yes, I did.
In either hand, right?
Yes, he can.
Would he also be able, in your opinion, to grab the hair of Nicole Brown Simpson and yank her head back to hyperextend her neck prior to taking a knife and slashing at her throat area? Did he have the strength in his left hand to do that, sir?
Oh,
You may answer the question.
but it's a compound question.
I'll try and simplify it. Doctor, did Mr. Simpson have sufficient strength, in your opinion, to grab the hair of his former wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and yank her head back to fully expose her neck?
If he had his left hand and didn't have to hyperflex back his wrist, he did have motion and strength that was within normal, as I put on my exam, with the exception of he was unable to fully extend the elbow, but his flexion was normal on my exam, and his strength was normal on my exam.
So my question still, which has not been answered, doctor, is could he, with his left hand, have grabbed the hair of his ex-wife and pulled her head back?
In a stationary situation, yes.
And when stationary, I want you to assume she is collapsed on the walkway in front of her condominium. That's the kind of condition you're talking about, right?
That's correct.
And in your opinion, he could do that.
That is correct.
And not only could he do that, doctor, in your opinion, could he then, with his right hand holding a knife, slit her throat? Did he have the strength in his hand to do that?
Given a stationary hypothetical, as you have said, yes, I believe that that would be possible.
Doctor, by the way, did you ask Mr. Simpson if he was right or left-handed?
Yes, I did.
Which is he?
I didn't put that down in here. He's right-handed.
You didn't put that in your report?
I'll have to look. I don't have it written down here that I can see.
Doctor, that would be a pretty significant aspect to find out, wouldn't it, when you're trying to at least evaluate the limitations Mr. Simpson may have due to his arthritic condition that you found?
Yeah, I know he's right-handed, and number two, it's a readily accessible information, so it's not a nuclear secret. So I'm not sure that it's a vital piece to put down, but it would have been helpful, yes.
Well, for example, you found, did you not, that the limitation in dorsiflexion, that's flexing the wrist back, was the left wrist, right?
Correct.
Not the right wrist, right?
That's correct.
And would you agree that if Mr. Simpson were right-handed, that normally he would have at least somewhat greater strength, even if he were healthy between the left and the right hands, he would have greater strength in the right hand than in the left hand?
That's true for most people. Sometimes athletes can be pretty ambidextrous, but I think that's a fair statement.
When did he have the surgery to his left wrist, doctor?
1965.
And when did he start his professional career with the Buffalo Bills?
I don't have that exact date.
How many years did he play?
I don't have those exact dates.
Doctor, if I told you he played 11 years, would that sound pretty reasonable to you?
Was from the late 60s to the early 80s, somewhere in there, yes.
And doctor, so he was playing professional football after he had surgery to that left wrist, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And if I told you he gained over 11,000 yards rushing, would you accept that as a reasonable representation of his skills as a football player?
Yes, I would.
And that he received, that is, he caught passes for over 2,000 yards? Does that sound reasonable to you?
Sounds reasonable.
Now, doctor, given that status, is it did you do anything to test the relative strengths between the left hand and the right hand? We've talked about normal grip strength, we talked about maximum grip strength, now I'm talking about relative grip strength.
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
I found that they were roughly equal.
And on what basis did you form that opinion? Was that a subjective evaluation from how he gripped your hands?
That's correct. That's why I explained when we did that demonstration last Friday why you do the grip simultaneously so that you can assess one side compared with the other.
So given that he was right-handed, and given that he did not have surgery to his right wrist, and given that you did not find significant limitation of motion of the right wrist vis-a-vis the left wrist, you found that nevertheless he had the same grip strength in his left hand as his right hand. Is that a correct statement?
That's a correct statement.
Doctor, before we get into the photographs on the injuries, I wanted to be clear on something. Mr. Shapiro asked you about your background to evaluate knife cuts and so forth, and you mentioned your tour, if you will, moonlighting in emergency rooms. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Is that the primary basis on which you have the expertise in this area?
That plus working emergency rooms in my training at Harvard Med School, as well as during my internship and residency, as well as seeing cuts during my private practice years subsequent to that.
What percentage of your practice involves seeing cuts?
I'd say it's very small now, but still probably see 1 or 2 cuts a week.
Wouldn't it be accurate to say that most people who have a cut that they think might require medical attention run to the local emergency room, not to the Beverly Hills doctor?
Not in my practice. We still do a lot of stitching.
Okay. Your ER moonlighting, you say, is during medical school, right?
No.
I'm starting to...
You don't moonlight in a medical school, but basically you do rotations in an emergency room. And basically there at Massachusetts General Hospital, you know, when you see the people getting out after the Boston Bruin games with all sorts of cuts and slashes, that's basically the foundation of my medical school years.
And as a medical student, you're basically relegated to doing, I'll use the term, scut work in the ER?
Well, I'd say at a county hospital, it's see one, do one, teach one. So basically, even as a third-year medical student, I was stitching up wounds there.
And doctor, your moonlighting days during your internship and residency period, is that correct?
That's correct, and afterward.
Okay, you got out of medical school in 1978?
Correct.
June of 1978, roughly?
Correct.
You started a 1-year rotating internship?
1-year internship in internal medicine.
So you did the whole 12 months in internal medicine?
Correct.
And that was at Cedars?
That's correct.
And then you did, what, 3 more years of a residency in internal medicine at Cedars?
That is correct.
And you're moonlighting during that period?
Yes, I am.
And moonlighting is basically a way for doctors to make some extra money because residency programs are not notoriously well-paying. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
And you moonlighted, what'd you say, a day or 2 a week or a month?
I would say I averaged 2 days a week.
Now, doctor, again, during this period of time that you're moonlighting, you're still a doctor in training, though, aren't you?
That's absolutely correct.
And you stopped moonlighting 1984?
I'd say that's a fair estimate.
And that's shortly after you completed your chief residency in internal medicine at Cedars. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, doctor, did you ever take any examination to become board certified in emergency room medicine?
No, I did not. I was board eligible, but I did not take the test since I wasn't planning to go into emergency room medicine.
And board eligible merely means that you've completed the necessary requirements?
There is a certain number of hours, unfortunately the exact number I can't give you, but I was substantially over the number of hours you need to then be able to go down to Chicago and take the emergency room boards, which is something that anyone planning to stay in emergency room medicine, does.
Does the board require at the time you were moonlighting that you be a chief resident in the emergency room?
No, it did not.
To your knowledge, does it now?
I think things are a little bit changed from back when I did it. I don't know what the exact regulations to be able to take the boards in emergency room medicine are currently.
Since I believe the court's going to take a break shortly, let me just finish with the curriculum vitae, and then we'll start in with the other materials later. Doctor, let me ask Mr. Fairwell from Defense Exhibit 1248 to put on the third page of your curriculum vitae. This is a heading of national television interviews, is that correct?
That's correct.
And if Mr. Fairwell will just pan this page so that we'll see its entirety. Doctor, is this the kind of data that one normally finds in a physician's curriculum vitae?
I don't believe it is.
Now, doctor, with respect to publication, let me ask Mr. Fairlow, put on page 2 of your curriculum vitae. And let me start in the, I think you might turn your head to the right and you'll see it. The last entry, that is a book that you authored, is that correct?
That is correct.
And if nothing else, doctor, you sold one more copy since you took the stand, had a chance to read it. You're okay, it's just a bruise. That's the book, correct?
Yes, it is.
Doctor, would it be accurate to say that this book is, in the parlance of today's language, kind of a tell-all book of your period of time as a physician with the Los Angeles Raiders?
I would say it's an expose of some of the behind-the-scenes things that go on where players are pretty much crumpled up like an old can of soda and discarded, yes?
Well, you're very critical of management, Mr. Davis and the Raiders management, are you not?
I had a lot of problems with his approach to the game of football, and I felt that he put winning football games over the health of players, and that's essentially the reason why I came out with the agreement of over 40 of the players who gave me medical consent to reveal their particular medical history so that we could try to change the way things are done in professional football and hopefully in other professional sports as well.
You were a patient advocate, weren't you? You're a player advocate as a physician.
I think the players have a lot of things that they have to learn, but I think that management, and certainly in the instances that I demonstrated, is really taking advantage of the commodity of the quote-unquote player and seeing the sequelae, seeing the end result of what the players end up at, seeing them with amputations, seeing them, being described by their wives as, very difficult getting out of bed in the morning, hearing them say that they have no money and less cartilage. It was something that really moved me. And given the whole situation that no one else had ever talked about it, I felt that I should step out. And obviously I knew I was going to take a hit for doing it.
Now, doctor, you said, and this is on page 326 of the real-time transcript, this was the question from Mr. Shapiro. And what is your experience in dealing with athletes in a professional capacity? And your answer is, I was the team physician for the Los Angeles Raiders from 1993 until 1990. You gave that answer.
1980?
1983 until 1990.
That's correct.
Doctor, in fact, you were not the team physician for the Los Angeles Raiders. Isn't that correct?
No, that's incorrect. There's a team physician and there's a team orthopedist. I was the team physician and there was a team orthopedist.
Well,
That's how it's typically said in every team.
Well, Dr. Robert Rosenfeld, Rosenfeld, was the orthopedic surgeon for the Raiders, correct?
That is correct.
And in the hierarchy of authority in the medical side, he had authority over you. Isn't that correct?
No one really had authority over me, but he was closer to the owner, and that is where the whole trauma, the whole tragedy really occurred, yes.
How long had Dr. Rosenfeld been with the team before you joined it, if you know?
He had been with the team since, I believe, they used to fly him up from Los Angeles when they were with the Oakland team, so he had been the team doctor from the 60s for the Raiders.
And he would have the primary responsibility, would he not, for evaluating orthopedic injuries that players on the team had? You would not have that responsibility, correct?
That is correct.
Your Honor, is this inappropriate?
Yes, it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break at this time. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Doctor, you can step down, and please come back in 15 minutes. All right, we'll try to finish you up this morning. All right, we'll take 15. Please. Go ahead and have a seat, Doctor. All right, the record should reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. And Mr. Kelberg, you may complete your cross-examination.
Your Honor, once again, I understand the court's subtle hint,
Thank you.
although I believe that it may take longer because of some video that will be shown in the course of the examination. Doctor, we're talking about Dr. Rosenfeld as the team orthopedic surgeon, correct?
That's correct.
And even in situations where you thought a player had an orthopedic condition and you disagreed with what Dr. Rosenfeld's view was of the situation, it would not be within your field of expertise to diagnose the condition for the purposes of getting the treatment started, right? An
No.
orthopedic condition.
My job, obviously, is to treat all non-orthopedic, non-joint and muscle diseases. However, ethically, and this is what the book was all about, when I saw things that I felt were being mistreated, and then obviously the reason I resigned, when I saw flagrant medical malpractice or possibly fraud, that he was misrepresenting to the player in an effort to get the player to play. All of those instances, I would go behind the scenes and make sure they saw other orthopedic surgeons. So yes, I would act as an orthopedic surgeon in the sense of sending them to a quote-unquote legitimate orthopedic surgeon. So I wouldn't just sit back and take his word because he quote-unquote had boards in orthopedics and I did not.
Doctor, you didn't act as an orthopedic surgeon in that situation. You acted as a triage doctor who felt there was a problem outside the field of your expertise, and you sent the patient to a physician in the field of expertise you thought appropriate. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Now, Dr. Rosenfeld is now deceased. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Doctor, yes, Mr. Fairlow's back, and now I need Exhibit 507, which I have here, and I'll ask Mr. Fairlow again to put on page 5. This is your initial report dealing with the orthopedic examination, and if we can get Mr. Fairlow, will be at the bottom of the document. So if we can, all right. Now, doctor, you testified in response to direct exam by Mr. Shapiro about range of motion tests. Again, if the court would permit for the doctor to step down. Doctor, would you use me as Mr. Simpson for the purposes of demonstrating what you asked Mr. Simpson to do in order to assess his shoulder range of motion?
Shoulder range of motion, basically.
And for the record, we have to describe what you're doing for the record. Why don't you get back into position, if you would, please, doctor, just before you move it. For the record, Your Honor, the doctor has his left hand resting on my left shoulder. He has his right hand underneath approximately my left wrist, and he's starting to elevate my arm upward, and he has done so to a position which is approximately parallel to my body as I stand.
Yes.
And then he has allowed my arm to drop down. Is that the test you did with Mr. Simpson?
That's one of the shoulder tests.
Did you do any additional tests on the shoulder for range of motion?
Yes, it did.
And the next one would be?
Internal and external range of motion.
All right, if we'll do it slowly, doctor. You have asked me, or you basically put my left arm in a bent position where it's bent at the elbow and my left forearm hand is resting across the midsection of my front of my body, right? You have to keep your voice up, doctor.
That's correct.
And now what are you going to do with it?
Externally rotate the shoulder.
You have to speak up.
We're going to externally rotate the shoulder.
And what you've done, doctor, is with your left hand, get back in position. I can't remember all this. With your left hand on the palm surface of my left hand, as you pushed my left forearm and hand back, you have started to turn my left wrist and hand. You're moving it such that it's, well, you describe it.
Trying to keep the hand and the wrist stable. Basically, we're keeping the elbow at 90 degrees. We're just trying to ascertain solely what the internal and external range of motion capabilities are of the shoulder. We're not really trying to affect any other joint.
All right, and you rotate it to what final resting position if you complete the exam?
Well, basically, we're going back to about this level here.
And for the record, Your Honor, the doctor has stopped where now my left forearm and hand with the palm facing to the sky is, doctor, would you describe that as about
60 degrees or so.
60 degrees from
Basically, 60 degrees from
a horizontal?
the 90 degree mark here. So in other words, if this is your starting position, we're going about 60 degrees. We're going all the way there.
Starting position would be with my forearm and hand straight out in front of my body so that it's at a 90-degree angle to my chest.
Correct.
And the first two tests that you just described, Mr. Simpson, left shoulder, full range of motion.
That is correct.
Right shoulder, full range of motion.
That is correct.
Any other range of motion tests for the shoulders that you did?
I think that was the initial screening of his range of motion. We also, of course, in the neurologic, you look for tremor, and then you also get forward flexion of the shoulder, which is a separate thing right there.
And for the record, you raised your two arms upright, where your arms are now at a 90-degree angle to your body, but they're being held out at about the level of the breast. And did Mr. Simpson accomplish that test
Yes, he did.
appropriately?
Yes, he did.
You may retake the stand, doctor. Now, doctor, in your report, if you'll look, you describe about halfway down, right knee with slight, not halfway, maybe a third of the way, right knee with slight crepitus, inability to flex the last 10 degrees. Crepitus, is that a medical term? If I walked and you kind of hear creaking of my bones, is crepitus a term that might describe what you're hearing?
It might describe what you're hearing, but you also can, some people just have a snapping of the joint, so there may be some confusion there.
Now, is crepitus necessarily a limiting symptom?
No, it is not.
Doctor, the next entry down deals, oh, I'm sorry, inability to flex the last 10 degrees. Again, with the court's permission, could the doctor step down? Doctor, and if I have to sit somewhere, I'm going to be the patient again. Could I sit, with the court's permission, perhaps on the edge of counsel table?
Sure.
I can move my own materials without having it all fall off on Ms. Clark. Doctor, I would be in a sitting position.
That's correct.
What would you do to
Sitting
test?
or a lying position, actually.
Which did you have with Mr. Simpson? I can lie
lying
back.
position.
May I take my coat off, Your Honor?
You may. We have assistance clearing that off, Ms. Clark?
I'm sorry?
I'm asking Ms. Clark, we have some assistance in clearing those items.
Oh.
off the table.
That's okay, I don't mind lying on my own stuff.
Basically, there's a, you test for extension, and then basically you test for flexion. Okay?
This is flexion, doctor?
This is knee flexion, correct.
All right, and for the record, and this is a tough one for me to describe except by feel, the doctor has got my knee bent in such a position that the lower part of my leg is as close as it's ever probably going to get to the back of my upper leg.
All right, and doctor, could you switch around just so the jurors on the other side of the jury box can see
Sure.
what you're doing there?
This is extension.
And extension for the record is he has had my leg straightened out at the knee. Is that correct, doctor?
That is correct.
With his arm supporting my leg.
And this is flexion, and in relatively flex individuals, you can get the heel to touch the buttocks, okay?
But I'm not that flex.
Well, his heel did touch his buttocks. There's a wide range of normal. It can be, there's tables for what normal individuals are able to flex, but in his situation, he basically was, somewhere in this range, which isn't terrible, but isn't normal either, and that's basically where, you make mental notes to yourself as a doctor, and you say 10, 20 degrees less. How accurate is that? You just note that basically they're getting nowhere near their butt, and it's a little bit less than what even some of your stiff patients might be able to do. In addition, when you put your hand right here and you move, this is where the crepitus comes in. You feel this vibration, and that's what is meant by crepitus that he said.
And doctor, before you leave though, a person who had full flexion would be in what situation? If you'll put my leg, if it's physically possible.
See how his heel touched his
Okay,
buttock?
you're holding my leg back there.
Correct.
Assuming is that what you try and do? You hold the leg back there?
You just try to bounce it right off there.
Okay.
In other words, you're going to try to resist on me now. Is that what I'm getting?
No, I'm asking you if, in doing the test, do you ask the patient to try and flex it as far as the patient
No, I do
can?
not. No, I do it. I ask them to relax as best they can, and then I passively move and try to assess the range of motion.
And a 10-degree limitation, would you show what is the distance for 10 degrees?
Basically, again, what's the best that somebody can do? That's where you have this wide variation of normal. But he was something like this, not severe, but not normal either. And that's all that 10 degrees means.
Now, doctor, and you did the same with the left, is that correct?
That is correct.
I think I need to put my jacket back on.
Those are the rules.
And according to your report, doctor, you said the left knee showed marked crepitation, has anterior-posterior laxity, right?
That is correct.
That's just front to back.
That is correct.
And that there's an inability to flex the last 15 to 20 degrees. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And 15 to 20 degrees would be roughly 5 to 10 degrees more in the form of a limitation of the left knee than the right, correct?
That's correct. Again, you have to remember when you're in, and let's be frank, you're moving as fast as you can through. A lot of these are crypt notes for yourself to try to assess things. It certainly means it's worse than the right. Does it mean 20 degrees or 30 or 15? It's somewhere in that range where it is limited more than the other, but not, again, stuck at 90 degrees or not stuck at a level that when he walks, the toe's going to catch when he tries to swing through in the gait.
Well, doctor, when you're making this report out, you want to be as accurate as possible, don't you, with respect to your evaluation?
That's absolutely correct.
And there's nothing that prevented you from writing down on a piece of paper whatever the limitation of flexion was with respect to either knee, correct?
I assessed it based on looking at it.
I want to invite counsel's attention to page, again, 327 of the real-time transcript, and ask, Doctor, if you gave this as part of your direct examination testimony following questioning by Mr. Shapiro. And when you move the knee should go through a certain range of motion, which I can demonstrate. You can see it is straight 180 degrees. When I flex it, there is a different range that everyone can flex. That by nature, typically it goes back to 135 degrees, 140, whatever. He was able to extend his knee. Really, he could only flex it to a point where he was limited by 25 to 30 degrees approximately. Did you testify in part as I've just read, Doctor?
Yes, I would assume so.
And your report says only 15 to 20 degrees, not 25 to 30 degrees. Is that correct, Doctor?
That's correct.
If you wanted to portray Mr. Simpson in worse condition with respect to that knee and limitation of movement, you would have done so by giving him a greater limitation of flexion, 25 to 30, than what is described in your report as 15 to 10. Is that correct?
I was basically talking off the top of my best of recollections, and obviously wasn't reading my report when I gave that answer.
Well,
But my report, again, a lot of these things are shorthand for what you observe over time in your own practice, and these are, this is not an orthopedic exam by an orthopedist. An orthopedist look through all his previous evaluations, often don't get out an exact angle measuring device to detect it, and so it was a rough approximation. Given the time constraints, that was, the best that I felt was able to be done.
Doctor, has Mr. Simpson been evaluated at your suggestion by an orthopedist since June 15th, 1994?
I discussed it with his orthopedist. He has no acute reasons to be seen by an orthopedist currently, so no, he has not.
And Doctor, you've come in to testify in direct examination about these orthopedic limitations of Mr. Simpson, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Would you agree it would be more appropriate to have his orthopedist come in and give an opinion on an area within the orthopedist's field of specialty than for you, who by your admission is not an orthopedist?
Correct.
And who has not done a thorough and complete examination, but rather a throwaway examination, to use your term, of Friday?
All I can do is report what I saw. I have no ability to have other people come in and testify or...
Well, my question was, Doctor, wouldn't it be more appropriate to have an orthopedist rather than you? But I won't ask to pursue that question because you said all you can do is come in and testify. Is that what you were doing when you made the suggestion in Exhibit 513? As I previously discussed with Dr. M. Bodden, OJ severe left wrist arthritis and resultant marked decreased mobility of that joint may have implications for the forensic pathologist?
When we discussed his medical condition and I was asked questions by the forensic pathologist that was hired on the case, I responded as honestly as I could and communicated that in that letter. I didn't really have anything to hide as far as I was concerned.
Well, Doctor, if you wanted to have Mr. Simpson evaluated for his physical capability to murder two human beings, and you were concerned that because of limitations from surgeries to his ankle or surgeries to his wrist and arthritis, that he may not be capable of murdering these two people, wouldn't it seem logical to have Dr. Job, who was his orthopedic surgeon for many years, correct?
That is correct.
Wouldn't it be logical to have him conduct a thorough evaluation before trial of Mr. Simpson to see where he is today from where he was when Dr. Job last saw him?
Objection. Actually, it's a two-part question because we stopped with each other.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
Dr. Huizenga, wouldn't it be appropriate if one were concerned about orthopedic limitations of Mr. Simpson to have Dr. Job, his orthopedist of many years, examine him before trial, right?
I'm not conducting the defense. I'm just reporting what I saw when he came to my office, and he came to my office because of physical problems, and the orthopedic things were things that I observed that you are very interested in, but very frankly, I was less interested in because I had, as I have stated before, two other problems that I felt were more important for his immediate physical health. He had a rheumatologist that was seeing him, and the feeling was, from a medical standpoint, there was nothing to be gained from having an orthopedist see him either acutely for the 1 or 2 days that he was not in custody, or in arrears once he went in jail. There was no acute benefit that he could do to OJ's health. If you want to ask, should it have been done for other reasons, I'm not the person to ask that to.
Well, doctor, you recommended to players on the Raiders that they see orthopedists and neurosurgeons for second and third opinions when you thought the need arose, didn't you?
Absolutely.
And have you ever suggested, let me go back to your report that is Exhibit 507, which says, this is from page 6, and I'll ask Mr. Fairwell to put it back up under item 10. Which says to discuss with ankle specialists when patient's current situation resolved. You wrote that in your report, right, doctor?
Yes, I did.
And the current situation meant his legal situation, isn't that correct?
His whole life situation, which included the fact that, right, he wasn't able to travel. We couldn't get him to specialists that we might otherwise have wanted to because of other life things like going to funerals, etc. And we had to evaluate what is urgent on a medical side and what could be handled sometime later. And and my opinion was that the orthopedic things, although very vexing, there was nothing acutely to be done, and that those things could be handled at some future date.
Doctor, isn't it correct that in assessing the effects of arthritis, it's extremely important to look at a patient over a period of time to compare how the patient is today with how the patient was, let's say, a year ago?
Absolutely.
Because these can be progressive diseases, correct?
That is correct.
And so if the question was, well, let me withdraw that. You told us that the last time Dr. Job saw Mr. Simpson was July 13th of 1993, correct?
That is correct.
And as you've testified here in response to direct and cross-examination about Mr. Simpson's condition, you're talking about it on June 15th, 1994, correct?
That is correct.
Do you agree that Dr. Job would be in a very good position as an orthopedic surgeon to have evaluated Mr. Simpson around the time of your evaluation to see whether he has shown any progression in any osteoarthritic condition he had existing as of the time of the July 93 examination?
No, I don't feel that that would be helpful at all. There's only one of two scenarios that happens. Either his osteoarthritis has progressed or it has not. In either instance, there would be nothing medically that we would do different other than going after his immediate problems, and in addition to which, obviously, having him see the rheumatologist and see if there were other conditions that could be treated. Osteoarthritis is a chronic degenerative disease, and short of surgery, there's nothing an orthopedist can do other than give pain medications and prescribe rest and physical therapy. Those things were handled, given the time constraints, given the other things going on. No, I would really have to disagree with you. I don't think seeing an orthopedist on the 15th would have helped his medical condition. Yes, maybe it would have pertained to some sort of defense measure. I can't answer to that. But from a medical situation, if I had a person that was leaving to Europe on a Friday and presented on a Wednesday, as he did, no, I don't think that we would make them change all their work plans and their busy pre-trip schedule to go see an orthopedist. So, no, I'm not really sure what you're driving at there.
Well, doctor, first of all, you visited Mr. Simpson as a physician in the jail since his incarceration, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And again, to your knowledge, has Dr. Job gone down to examine him?
No, he has not.
And you didn't feel there was anything of an immediacy to his orthopedic condition that required an orthopedist to see him over the next few days, at least, of June 15th, right?
That is correct.
In fact, you talk about until his current situation is resolved, and that's still not resolved, right?
That is correct.
Is it still your opinion there's no need for him to see an orthopedic surgeon because that situation has not yet been resolved?
The reason he doesn't need to see an orthopedic surgeon now in this phase is he had significant joint problems when I saw him on the 15th. Those problems, if anything, intensified over the first several weeks he was incarcerated. It was felt by his rheumatologist that he had a flare of rheumatoid arthritis. He was put on a rheumatoid arthritis disease-modifying drug, and his symptoms markedly improved. It was on the basis of that, the fact that his swollen left knee, swollen ankle, his painful wrist, his new onset right wrist ganglion, and some of his other complaints resolved, that no further orthopedic consultation was felt deemed necessary at that time in the jail.
Doctor, you say that Dr. Maltz, who's the rheumatologist, felt that there was an acute episode of rheumatoid arthritis, but all the clinical laboratory results were negative. Isn't that correct?
He felt there was an acute flare based on the fact that you diagnosed rheumatoid arthritis on 7 criteria with the aid of biopsies. He had a number of those 7 criteria that classified him as having rheumatoid arthritis.
Which ones?
He had morning stiffness.
That can be from osteoarthritis, right?
That can be from osteoarthritis as well.
And Mr. Simpson had complained all the time of morning stiffness when he gets up, right?
He's had that for quite a time, although he's had severe flares where he is so bad he can't tie his shoes and essentially is trapped in bed, and he's had at least 2 significant flares of that nature. This certainly wasn't that bad.
Any others?
Any other symptoms that
That fit
7
this
criteria?
classical? Exactly.
Right. He had,
I'm sorry. Any other of the classical symptoms? You said he did not have bilateral, correct?
no, I didn't say that. I said he had both elbows with fixed flexion contractures, which may be seen in rheumatoid arthritis. He had bilateral hand disease. To classify for symmetry, they don't necessarily have to be the exact same joints, sometimes different joints on the hand. He had X-ray changes consistent with rheumatoid arthritis.
Which X-ray changes were those, doctor?
I'd prefer to leave all that for the rheumatologist. I don't want to pull out X-ray films when I'm definitely not my field of expertise. You're asking me what signs were positive, and I'm giving them to you, but I'm not saying that I specifically corroborated them with my expertise. These were things that, based on X-ray reports, were said to be positive. I mean, I can pull out the reports and read them through with you, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on the erosive changes and the other changes characteristic of rheumatoid arthritis that you don't see in osteoarthritis.
Doctor, what, if anything, have you done since June 15th, 1994, to independently evaluate Mr. Simpson's physical activities over a period of, let's say, 3 months before June 15th?
What have I done to independently?
Yes, in other words, without taking Mr. Simpson's word for any limitations, to see if there was independent evidence to support any claims of limitation.
Again, he never complained to me of limitation other than the fact that I said, "Why are you limping?" And he said, "You know, this is just an ongoing thing, and, you know, I can't walk a golf course," but that's after I questioned him. He wasn't complaining to me of joint problems.
My question, doctor, is what, if anything, have you done to independently evaluate any limitations Mr. Simpson may have had over the last 3 months of his life before June 15th, 1994?
I have heard from other individuals about his difficulty walking, his trouble getting around a golf course. I have requested all his previous medical records, but of course those are not helpful in the last 3 months.
Because he hasn't seen a doctor for 11 months.
That's exactly correct.
Incidentally, doctor, have you been provided with any exercise videotapes of Mr. Simpson from late May of 1995?
I saw that
95, Counsel?
94, excuse me. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, I have. I saw that this Sunday. This
When did you
Saturday.
first see it?
I saw it Saturday, and I saw it also about 3 or 4 months ago.
And how was it that you saw that? Was it brought to your attention, or had you independently identified that?
It was basically something that I independently heard about and was curious about.
And doctor, the people who you got information from, were these friends of Mr. Simpson's?
Yes, they were.
Now, have you heard the testimony of the people that the defense has called over the last week or so? People such as Mr. Howard Bingham,
No, I know nothing about that testimony.
Mr. Valerie,
No, I didn't hear
Mr.
anything about that.
Mr. Kilduff,
No, I didn't hear anything about
Mr. Merrill.
that. No.
Let me read the whole list then. Mr. Gladden, Mr. Norris, Mr. Williams, Mr. Partridge. And also from previous time called by the prosecution, Alan Park and Mr. Kalin. Any
No.
of those witnesses' testimony did you hear or review?
No, I did not.
Now, Doctor, you said Mr. Simpson limped into your office, and again, to use your term, he walked like Tarzan's grandfather, correct?
That's correct.
Doctor, I want you to assume that these people I mentioned saw Mr. Simpson on June 12th in Los Angeles, or saw him on June 13th in Chicago, and that these people, to a person, say that they saw no limp on the part of Mr. Simpson.
Objection, Your Honor, this case difference.
Sustain.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Your Honor, obviously I'm at some disadvantage.
Without
All
the
right.
court reporter, please. All right, proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, if there have been witnesses called among the people that I listed, and when asked if they observed any limitation on the part of Mr. Simpson walking, that those people who were asked indicated they saw no such limp, would you accept such testimony as consistent with your findings on June 15th?
No, I wouldn't.
And, doctor, is it very difficult to identify a person who is limping if you're not a doctor?
Well, there are certainly subtle variations of a limp, and certainly I can tell a limp that someone else at first glance may say they look like they're walking normally, but the limp he had when he came into my office, I believe anyone would have been able to identify.
Would you come down, please, with the court's permission, and in a way where the jurors can see, demonstrate, I'm going to ask you to do this since you're the one who saw it, demonstrate how Mr. Simpson walked in a limp which, in your opinion, demonstrated that he walked like, again, your phrase, Tarzan's grandfather.
Your Honor, I would object. We would, have no objection to Mr. Simpson walking and having the doctor instruct.
Well,
Doctor, you may step down.
I think you need a couple of foundational questions here, though.
Doctor, you did observe him in your office on June 15th, 1994, walking, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you observed at that time what you thought to be a limp, right?
Yes, I did.
And it was from the way he walked which led you to talk about he walked like Tarzan's grandfather, right?
That's correct.
Again, with the court's permission, I'd ask that he be allowed to demonstrate what he saw in the way of a limp of Mr. Simpson.
Doctor, do you believe that you can accurately reenact the manner in which Mr. Simpson walked?
It's very difficult. He had two joints that were bothering him, his ankle and that knee, and he kind of was hunched a little bit. It would be very difficult. I mean, I could try, but it'd be difficult. And to know exactly the degree, I think it'd be a very iffy proposition.
All right, the objection is sustained.
But, doctor, in your opinion, even though you feel at this time that you cannot demonstrate that it was clearly something that a layperson would be able to see.
Yes, it was.
And you would expect it to be present on June 12th. Is that correct? Given that you saw it on June 15th.
Certainly could have been.
And doctor, assuming that these same witnesses, when asked about any observation of any kind of physical limitation or evidence of distress by Mr. Simpson, indicated they saw no such limitation or distress. Assuming that that is accurate testimony, would that be inconsistent with what you would expect on June 12th, given your findings of June 15th?
Could, Your Honor, depends on what the observations were.
Oh, well,
You may answer the question, doctor.
I saw a limp on the 15th. If he had no limp on the 12th, then obviously something has changed in the interval.
Or perhaps Mr. Simpson was faking a limp in your office?
That certainly would be in the differential.
Now, doctor, I didn't limit it to limps. I talked about any evidence of discomfort. People can grimace in pain from moving in a way that causes some kind of pain response, right?
That's correct.
Did you see Mr. Simpson evidence any kind of reaction to pain during the course of your June 15th examination?
He had some pain with the movement of his left ankle and left wrist and right ankle, left knee, and left wrist.
Right ankle, left knee, left wrist. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what did you see, if you can describe it, that led you to believe he was demonstrating some kind of distress from whatever testing you were doing in those areas?
Typically, you get a reflex. I think everybody has had it when somebody twists your arm back suddenly and unexpectedly. It's very difficult, unless you're a movie star, to basically deny pain. And when we did those sorts of things, basically, again, it wasn't earth-shattering, but it appeared that another 2 or 3 degrees was not going to be all that much fun for the patient, and it's basically another clinical sign that doesn't have a number, doesn't have some kind of blood test that's stamped on a report, but this is an observation that you cull after years of doing that sort of evaluation.
It's a subjective interpretation, is it not, doctor?
Yes, it is.
And if you, in fact, are an advocate for Mr. Simpson, that can, even in a subconscious way, lead to a bias that influences how you saw what you've just described. Isn't that correct, doctor?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Doctor, you said unless you're a Hollywood star, something like you can
Well, I was thinking
fake
of
pain?
I was thinking of the Mel Gibson movie Braveheart, where they start withdrawing body organs and he doesn't mutter one yelp. I think that that's, again, a Hollywood sort of thing, and not something that happens in an office, a medical office.
How about a veteran of National Football League football? Are those people who tend to be able to play through pain?
I think that's a fair statement.
And in fact, inviting your attention to page 20 of your book, did you write the following? As Dr. Rosenfeld was rechecking Marcus's, that's Marcus Allen, is it?
Yes, it is.
Neurological status, I was pulled away by a player who walked me over to a teammate sitting on the bench with a grossly deformed and swollen left ring finger. It was obviously dislocated. Quote, "It'd be nice to get an x-ray before we put that thing back in," unquote, I told the player. Quote, "Doc, this is the NFL," unquote, he replied. Quote, "I gotta go back in 2 plays," unquote. Seeing Rosenfeld still busy with Marcus, I grabbed the lineman's wrist with my left hand, then slowly but firmly pulled the dislocated finger toward me with my right hand. Once I had good traction going, I flexed the finger forward. I felt a pop. The joint was back in place. Quote, "Okay, grip," unquote, I said. Quote, "Now open your hand. Good," unquote. As I taped the damaged fourth to the good third finger, I repeated, quote, "We're still going to need some x-rays at halftime," unquote. Quote, "Doc, there's a football game going on. Maybe sometime next week, okay?" Unquote. Quote, "Sometime this halftime," unquote, I countered. I couldn't get over the fact that he didn't even complain once about the pain. A normal emergency room patient would have been screaming. Did you write that, doctor?
Yes, I did.
And in fact, Mr. Simpson, with 11 years as a leading running back, initially on a very poor football team that provided him with something less than tremendous blocking, learned to play through pain. Isn't that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
And in fact, that even with whatever physical limitations you observed from your throwaway orthopedic examination, to use your term, there was nothing that physically prevented him from murdering these two people, as you told us on Friday, correct?
Overruled.
If you have the hypothetical where things are stationary, the strength was there to do as you asked me before, hold hair, pull back, and move his other extremities.
Doctor, you were asked on Friday if there was anything that you found which prevented Mr. Simpson from being physically capable of murdering Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. You were asked that question on Friday, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And your answer was no, there was no such limitation, right?
That is correct.
Now, doctor, have you ever visited 875 South Bundy, the crime scene?
No, I have not.
Doctor, I want you to assume there's been testimony from a forensic pathologist, Dr. Lakshmanan Satyavajaswaran, the chief medical examiner of Los Angeles County, that he has visited the 875 South Bundy scene, and in describing the location where Mr. Goldman's body was found and the circumstances surrounding blunt force trauma to the back of Mr. Goldman's hands, he testified that Mr. Goldman, in essence, was a caged animal with no place to go. I want you to assume that that is the testimony, in part, of Dr. Lakshmanan, and I'll save everybody the last name. Okay? Had you heard that testimony before, doctor?
No, I have not.
Now, doctor, you talked about the aerobic condition of Mr. Simpson. An aerobic condition is, like marathon runners have incredible aerobic condition, right?
That's correct.
Would it be accurate to say that there are certain professional football players who may not have particularly good aerobic conditioning?
That's absolutely true.
They have tremendous power, though, do they not?
That is true.
Now, doctor, if one assumes that the murder of Ronald Goldman was a question of power, not a question of aerobics, because Mr. Goldman had nowhere to go to be chased down, how would you describe the power of Mr. Simpson's upper torso?
I would say that he has some difficulties there, specifically the fixed flexion contracture. When you get a boxer, basically your punch is the body and the shoulder, but what you have to do is you have to snap out your arm, and when you have a fixed flexion contracture, imagine a boxer just going like that. You have some problems there. He certainly has power, and I've already described that I thought his motor was, for intensive purposes, fairly good, if not absolutely normal. However, that's one defect, and the other is his ability to use his hands, and the other is if there had to be any bending or any movement of the lower extremity, there could be problems there. Assuming, though, he is standing in a firm-footed position, then I think that given the difficulties with punching and the difficulties with full motion of that wrist, he would be similar to a man his age, certainly not a world-class athlete, but a man his age, he would be average.
Well,
I wouldn't hire him to, back me up in a bar fight. He isn't as powerful as he looks, but he certainly is as powerful as someone else his stated age.
doctor, what did you do to assess the power of his upper torso?
Basically, looking at the flexion contractures of the elbows and the difficulty with the wrist. That's the only point that I'm basing that on.
And doctor, for example, would you describe the condition of Mr. Simpson's upper torso, the chest area, for example, and I'll ask Mr. Farrell, this is one of the defense exhibits 1249, the upper torso, the chest, and let me see if I can find the flip side showing the back. Yeah. I'm not sure if Mr. Farrell, could you make it smaller perhaps? And I think I'd rather go one by one. Let's start with, there we go. Doctor, would you consider Mr. Simpson's upper torso, front and back, to be well muscled,
Absolutely well muscled.
And doctor, muscles atrophy without use. They basically wither, don't they?
That's not true in all instances. Some people have huge muscle builds that work out very, very little. I don't personally fully understand it, but that's not absolutely correct, no.
But it would be very unusual.
It's in the realm of possibility, but certainly he has a, as I described, I think, in my exam, a very well-muscled body, certainly above average.
Did you ask Mr. Simpson if he lifted weights?
Yes, I did.
What was his answer?
No, he didn't.
Did he have a weight room in his home, if you know?
I don't know that.
Did he belong to any sports clubs, if you know?
I don't know that either.
Now, doctor, did you ask him to do any kind of exercise to test the power of that upper torso?
No.
That is, for example, bench press. You know what a bench press is, undoubtedly?
Yes, I do.
And what is that, just for everybody's benefit?
A bench press is where you lay on your back, you have a bar resting across the breast area, and you extend your arms in this sort of fashion.
Now, are there other tests that could be done besides a bench press that would assess Mr. Simpson's upper torso muscle strength?
I think you could go through every individual muscle and test its strength. What we did in the office is very generally test his gross strength in terms of his deltoids, in terms of the grip, as I said, in terms of the biceps over the range it was able to go, and the triceps over the range it was able to go. And those were all grossly normal, but we didn't assess his maximal strength, which is maybe one of the questions that you're asking.
And that's what I was going to ask you. You did not, in fact, assess how much strength he really has,
That's
right?
absolutely correct.
Now, doctor, you mentioned punching maneuver. What evidence, if any, do you have that the killer of these two people punched Mr. Goldman?
I have no idea.
You may answer the question.
I have no idea what the testimony's been about the incident, so I really can't say. That was just, you asked me what his power was, and that's the only area that I know he has some deficiency, but
Well, for example, doctor, if Mr. Goldman was killed with lethal knife thrusts, we're not talking about a punch, right?
no.
And there was no limitation. You said he could hold a knife, right?
Yes, he can.
And he's right-handed, right?
Yes, he is.
And you have no idea.
Excuse me, I also did write that in the exam, so that's,
Okay.
One
You
small
want to
thing.
tell us which page, just so.
it was page 1.
Okay.
46-year-old right-handed, right, the chief complaint.
Oh, I think I've got it here. Let me check.
God willing, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, doctor, I think the reason that that's a problem is the copy I was provided does not have on page 1
Okay.
the first material.
I'm sorry, that's,
So, I'm glad you brought it to our attention. Doctor, you have no idea then of the maximum strength in his right hand to thrust the knife that he could hold, in your opinion.
no, I don't. Other than the general tests were normal.
The general tests were all normal in that area, right? Now, doctor, are you familiar with something called catecholamines?
I know what catecholamines are.
What are they?
It's one of the hormones released by the adrenal cortex,
The adrenal cortex, is that correct?
the adrenal glands.
And in your training as a physician and your practice as an internist, physiology is a part of your medical knowledge, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And adrenaline is a catecholamine, is it not, sir?
Yes, it is.
Now, are you familiar with something called the sympathetic nervous system?
Yes, I am.
What is that, sir?
Sympathetic nervous system is something that comes into play when what's described in medicine, the 4 F's, happen, and that's fear, fright, flight, and mating.
And I'm sorry, mating?
Mating.
Would it be, if somebody were enraged, in an emotional state of rage, that can stimulate the sympathetic nervous system?
Yes, it can.
Now, doctor, and that happens without us intentionally saying to ourselves, I got to turn on the sympathetic nervous system.
It's automatic.
And in fact, one of the things that the sympathetic nervous system releases is adrenaline, right?
That's correct.
And from your training and experience as a physician, is it correct to say that there are anecdotal incidents reported of people who have very modest strength performing what appear to be superhuman activity when in the throes of an adrenaline rush?
I'm aware of several reports of mothers lifting cars and whatnot. I can't verify their authenticity.
But there is such anecdotal evidence, right?
There's anecdotal reports.
And basically what those say, for example, is the situation of a mother, for example, who is maybe 100 pounds, 90 pounds, lifting an automobile off of a pinned child, right?
I've heard of those reports, absolutely.
Now, doctor, if Mr. Simpson murdered Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman after being enraged, you would expect that he would be in the throes of an adrenaline rush, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Your Honor, counsel, speculation states that.
Overruled.
Your answer is that's correct.
That is correct.
And doctor, when professional football players are in a game, the plays last relatively few seconds, do they not?
That is true.
They huddle, figure out what play they're going to try and use, right?
That's correct.
They walk up to the line of scrimmage and get set to run the play, right?
That's correct.
Then the ball is snapped and the play takes off, right?
Correct.
And after the play is done, the players get up, sometimes slowly to conserve energy, right?
Sometimes not at all.
Not at all. And they walk back, assuming they're capable of doing so, to their huddle
Correct.
to do the next play, right?
That's correct.
Professional football players learn to harness their energies, to release them when it counts, during the play, right?
I think that's an accurate statement.
And in fact, what drives them and enhances their ability is part of the same mechanism that drives an adrenaline rush, correct? The sympathetic nervous system automatically, without asking it to, turning on whatever juices are harnessed in the body.
That turns out not to be the case. I think that pre-game jitters is when the sympathetic nervous system is just pumping. Actually, you get into a game and you make the first couple hits, the first couple plays, and you go into a zone. People aren't jiving up. They're not getting a sympathetic rush before every play. They're getting it pre-game possibly, but no. Once you're a professional, it's like somebody in any other profession. You get really nervous once you're out there and doing your thing. Pretty much all the adrenaline dies down, and you're really not under the influence of that sympathetic nervous system.
Well, doctor, what then drives the energy? You'd agree, would you not, that the player is operating at a much higher level physiologically when involved in the play, let's say a running back like Mr. Simpson, than when he's walking back to the huddle after the play to find out what's the next play?
That's correct.
And the body is able to turn it on and turn it off for him, correct?
Yes, it is.
And he doesn't have to say to the body, I'm turning it on and I'm turning it off. It's a natural aspect of the body's physiological phenomena.
That is true.
And so, doctor, is it also accurate that in professional football, players become comrades of each other and then a player gets traded to another team and they're now adversaries? Happens?
Happens,
But they still are friends off the field, right?
typically.
And in fact, after a game, it's not unusual that after they've been beating their heads against each other, that you'll see the players put an arm around each other from an opposing team, walk off the field, shaking hands, congratulating each other on a good game.
That,
Right?
Objection, relevance to
Are we about at the end of this one?
Yes.
All right.
Your answer, doctor? No, I'm not sure that he answered the question.
you were asking whether after a game sometimes opponents shake hands, and
And basically renew friendships.
I think that happens absolutely.
They have harnessed whatever rages may drive them during the game to remember their friendships after the game. They're not still going at each other's throats. That's your experience, doctor?
objection, assumes the fact not having it is a waste of the court's time.
Overruled. Last
You may
question.
You may answer the question, doctor.
That one you're going to have to give me over again.
Doctor, well, Ms. Clark's going to help me. I'm not computer literate, so, well, it takes too long to do it that way. Doctor, my question is that from your experience you have found, have you not, that players who have harnessed their energies and gone at each other, for lack of a better term, hammer and tong throughout the game, can thereafter control those same urges and act in a perfectly normal and cordial fashion with each other afterwards?
I think NFL football players are probably no different than lawyers in terms of attacking opponents and then after the event, shaking hands and going back to a civil, normal life.
I don't think, Doctor, you have to risk any concern that I would physically try and attack you. I present a most meek target. Your Honor, this might be an appropriate time to break.
All right, do you have much more?
I have probably some things to watch, as well as some brief questioning, yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the noon hour. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1:30. Dr. Heisinger, you're ordered to come back 1:30. All right, we will finish today.